morning, friends. I am taking some time this morning and I am going to be doing some pantry staples. I'm probably going to film a little bit of this throughout the week so you guys can see what my top 5 favorite pantry staples are and how I keep them integrated into our regular rotation of food. The first thing that I want to start off with today is homemade yogurt. I just started making homemade yogurt about 2 to 3 months ago and I've been absolutely loving it. You can do it without an Instant Pot. I use an Instant Pot specifically. You can do it without an Instant Pot in your oven at a low temperature, but the Instant Pot is honestly so easy because you literally set it and forget it. Who remembers those commercials from back in the day? But it's really, really easy. You put your mixture in the Instant Pot. There's actually a yogurt button. You hit it and you get to go. So doing yogurt is incredibly easy in my opinion. What I like to do is I make a few containers of yogurt. We keep them in our fridge, and when this is more than halfway empty, my last jar is like halfway empty, I will then start making a new batch of yogurt so that we're never out. It keeps going. So I like to do a 1-to-1 ratio, which is 1 tablespoon of yogurt for 1 cup of milk. So I'm gonna do 8 cups of milk for this particular recipe. So I'm gonna do 8 tablespoons of yogurt.
Once I have my yogurt cultures and my milk added to my Instant Pot, I then like to whisk it all together so that I don't get any lumps in the yogurt as it is fermenting. It'll then heat in the Instant Pot for 12 hours. I usually like to do this either fairly early in the morning or just before bed so that I have enough time to go through an entire ferment. Honestly, doing it overnight is so wonderful and easy because you just put it in before bed and then it is ready to go into the fridge in the morning.
So the next thing that I like to do as a pantry staple is actually bone broth. And I showed bone broth in a video, I don't know if it was last week or a couple of weeks ago. I'm not sure when in the timeline these are all gonna go up, but I did it in the Instant Pot. But since I just set up the yogurt in the Instant Pot, I'm actually going to be using my Dutch oven today to do a nice bone broth. It simmers for a bit longer on the stove. So the big difference between the Instant Pot and the stove is when I do it in the Instant Pot, it goes for 4 hours. When I do it on the stove, I like to do it for about 6 to 8 hours. I find the longer you let it simmer, the more thick and just collagen dense your bone broth will become. I really appreciate that. So we are gonna put that in the Dutch oven and I'm gonna continue to let that just sit and simmer for the entire day.
I tend to keep a bag of bones and veggie scraps such as carrots and onions in my freezer that I can grab at any time, and then I just pull it out whenever I'm ready to put together a batch of bone broth. Once I've had a healthy amount of bones into my Dutch oven, I will then fill the entire thing up to the top with water and add salt, pepper, and Italian seasoning. I will let it boil for about 40 to 45 minutes or so, and then I will drop it down to a simmer and let it simmer for a couple of hours. On this particular day, I think I let it simmer for about 6 or so hours, and then I turned the heat off and let it cool for another few hours so it wasn't so incredibly hot when I was putting it into the glass jars afterwards. Once my broth had cooled to a decent temperature, I then used a strainer to get all of the bones and scraps out of the vegetables from the pot. I do this kind of in two different ways. I get the largest chunks out at first with my strainer and I throw them into the trash. Then I put the strainer over a pitcher in the sink and I'll pour the broth into the pitcher. The strainer will then catch all of the extra remnants that are coming out of my pot, and I can then easily pour that pitcher into all of my glass jars. I like to save a bunch of glass jars when I'm doing different things, and that way I can be sustainable and reuse things very easily. These will usually keep in the refrigerator for at least 2 to 3 weeks, but we usually have already gone through them way before that. Probably within a week or two, we can go through a good 3 to 4 containers of bone broth. I like to have bone broth in my soups. I like to have bone broth added into just all sorts of things. Honestly, I put it into applesauce at one point. It is crazy what you can add bone broth to and the amount of health additives it really gives you as you are adding it into different bits of your diet. So the next morning, I got up and I took all of my yogurt that had been fermenting and then cooling overnight, and I placed it again into glass jars. I have so many of these glass jars. They were actually previously spaghetti sauce jars from Costco that I've been able to reuse, and I love that. It's been wonderful. But I just used a really simple funnel and I spooned the yogurt into the jars, easy peasy. This is the easiest way to keep it in the fridge, and then we are usually through at least 2 to 3 jars of this yogurt within about a week or so. My boys love yogurt. We love to have it for breakfast snacks, so we go through it pretty quickly.
So the next pantry staple that I want to do with you guys is sourdough bread. And I know this has been done a million times on the internet, but it truly is a staple in our house. If we have a nice loaf of bread to snack on, eat on, have prepped, have ready to go, then we are able to have it for lunch, we're able to have it in breakfast time, we're able to have it with our side for our dinner. It's really, really nice. And I did a sourdough sandwich bread a couple of weeks ago. If you missed that video, I will link it below. It's my favorite sandwich loaf that I like to do. It's like a traditional sandwich loaf, but I like to do a little bit of an artisan bread from time to time. And honestly, I'm at the point in my sourdough career, sourdough journey, where I can really just kind of throw a loaf together without measurements. I mean, I do basic measurements, but I don't follow a scale or anything like that because I just want it to be more of a utility than something that is for beautiful design purposes or to showcase my sourdough genius or whatever. I'm really just trying to have something that is really fast, easy, simple, and a staple in my pantry for my family to feed them on a moment's notice. So having a nice loaf together going is always good. I like to do loaves like this maybe on a Monday or a Tuesday because I know that I'm gonna be home the majority of the day. I usually don't grocery shop till later in the week. And I know the following day I will also most likely be home unless I have some random plans with friends or something like that. I'll also most likely be home. So that is always important when you're kind of planning your sourdough because you want to have a day of stretch and folds and a day for baking. So we are going to start putting together our bread. We will work on stretch and folds throughout the day. It's still it's Monday morning, so it's still kind of early. I'm going to stretch and fold through the majority of the day, let it hang out and rise overnight. Normally what I would do if it was warmer outside is I would start this maybe even earlier and then let it rise throughout the day and then put it in the fridge overnight. But because it has been so cold recently, I'm going to stretch and fold throughout the afternoon, early afternoon, and then I'm probably going to let it rise all night long, which is a really long rise, but when it's 20 degrees outside, That's fine because our kitchen is fairly cold to begin with. It's the coldest room in the house technically because we have our fireplace in the front of the house that's heating the majority of the house. So if I wanted to speed that up, I could put it next to the fireplace, but honestly, I find sourdough bread baking in the winter to be super easy because you don't have to be like rigid and on top of things and like to an exact time and an exact science, because the cold allows you to be a little bit more flexible with it. So I'm gonna let it rise all night, and then I will stick it in the fridge in the morning, let it sit in the fridge for a few hours just so that it gives this really nice shape and spring when I put it into the oven later on, and then I'll probably bake it tomorrow afternoon. So let's start putting together our loaf.
Now, like I said, sourdough has been something that I find to be so fun and relaxing at this point. It's not something that I take incredibly seriously. I'm not a micro baker, so I really enjoy to just have fun with making different types of sourdough bread as well as all sorts of fun treats. I found a really wonderful sourdough starter kit from Amazon. If you are wanting to start this bread making journey, you're new to the whole thing and you want all of the tools to get yourself started, I will have the link for this kit in the description below. It honestly is so helpful. For this particular recipe, I did about a half a cup of starter, around a cup of water. I like to add my water slowly to see how the texture feels. I don't want it to be too wet for sure. That's why I will tend to do less water in the beginning and then add more water later on if I need to. I do a teaspoon of salt and then 3 cups of flour. And as you can see, I realized that it was still just a tiny bit too dry, so I added the little extra bits of water as I went, and the dough came out beautifully. I like to pick my flour up from Azure Standard, and I really love their products. I think that they are fantastic organic farm to table co-op. And if you're interested in finding an Azure Standard drop near you and checking out some of their amazing organic groceries, I will have a link for them as well in the description if you would like to sign up. It's completely free to join, which I was very excited about. Unlike a lot of the bulk food stores like the Costco's, don't get me wrong, I love me a Costco, but unlike those bulk food stores, it's nice to not have to pay a yearly membership. Azure Standard is completely free to join. So once I combined all of my ingredients, I gathered them into a ball that's kind of a shaggy dough mixture, and I let that rest for at least a half hour. Then I'll do a series of stretch and folds over the next few hours, usually every 30 minutes or so. A lovely thing about the winter time is that the cold air doesn't really force you to work in any sort of a quick manner with sourdough. The dough takes its time to ferment, and it makes it really easy and a very relaxing task. You don't have to be rigid about your time period at all. And then I'm going to allow this dough to long ferment overnight, and then in the morning I will prepare it to be placed into a Banneton basket, and then I'm going to stick it into the fridge throughout the morning to just sort of get that nice cold texture to it. The reason why you want your dough cold is because it gives it a really nice spring in the oven when it is baking. It's also really easy to score when you have a very nice cold dough. About an hour before I want to take my bread out of the refrigerator, I then put my oven on at 400 450 degrees, and I place my Dutch oven into the oven so that it can get very hot and steamy. This is wonderful. You want to make sure your lid is on and everything, and it will create a nice steam pot for you. Once my Dutch oven is sufficiently warm, I'll then take my bread out of the refrigerator and I will score it. I bake the bread in the Dutch oven for about 20 minutes at 450 degrees with the lid on, and then for an additional 15 to 20 minutes at 425 degrees with the lid off. This bread was so easy to put together. It was absolutely delicious. We ended up having it with our dinner that night, and it is such a simple, quick, easy thing that I don't have to stress myself out about. I want to make sure that I add bread into my weekly kitchen essentials because it's so versatile. It goes with everything. It's so wonderful to have in your kitchen. And when I am on top of my bread making, I don't have to stress about having to buy any sort of ultra processed bread items. I have all that I need already in my pantry, and I really enjoy making sure my family is getting tons of healthy ingredients into their diet regularly.
So the next kitchen staple that I want to get into for today is actually kind of new for my kitchen, but it is something that I've been kind of working up to for a little while now. I used to buy all of my pasta from the store, but I have since started to transition to all homemade sourdough pasta, which is A, way more delicious, and B, definitely so much better for everyone's gut in our family. So this is something that I've been working up to, building into my regular weekly routine. So I put together a nice batch of sourdough pasta, and then I take it, I cut it into 2 different servings, and I put it in the freezer if I'm not going to be using it immediately, or I put it into the fridge. It's super easy to defrost. You can grab it with your meat if you are planning on doing pasta that week. Have it defrost with your meat in the fridge, and then you are set to go with your pasta rollers. So let's get into working on that recipe.
Now for this pasta recipe, it's actually incredibly easy, and once I learned it, I realized how simple it was to just make my own pasta at home. So I'm starting off with a full cup of sourdough starter. It can be either freshly fed starter or it can actually be discarded. It really doesn't matter for this recipe. And then I add 4 eggs and 3 cups of flour to my bowl. I tend to do a quick mix with a spoon before I put it into my KitchenAid mixer, simply because I really don't like the flour going all over the place. As the KitchenAid starts to really go crazy with the dough hook, flour tends to go flying. So I like to just do a quick little mix around with a wooden spoon before I put it into my KitchenAid setup. And then I let the dough hook mix it around for a good 10 minutes or so until you have a bit of that window pane test that the dough can pass. It works perfectly. I'll let the dough rest in my KitchenAid bowl for at least a half hour, but again, because it's wintertime, I really don't stress about how long this is because it's not something that is going to really bulk or grow too crazy being on my counter or in my fridge. I I then take my dough ball and I split it into 2 smaller dough balls, and I stick those into cling wrap. I package them up. Sometimes I'll put a timestamp on them if I know that it's going to be a little bit before I have pasta again. And then I'll stick sometimes one in the freezer and one in the refrigerator, depending on what I'm planning on making for dinner that week. So then whenever I'm ready to make pasta, I can just pull my pre-made dough out. I can stick that into my KitchenAid pasta attachments, which are really, really simple and easy to use. It's a pretty quick process. I can usually roll out my pasta dough in about 15 minutes or so, and then it only takes about 5 minutes of boiling on the stove to cook your pasta. So simple. I really love it. Anything that I'm using to bake or cook with in any of this video, I'll also have as much of that linked below in the description for you if you're interested in making any of these kitchen essentials in your home as well. And the very last thing that I am putting together for my kitchen essentials are just hard-boiled eggs. It's super simple, easy snack, but something that I make every single week. Sometimes I'll make 3 eggs, sometimes 5. I tend to not boil too many at once because I've definitely had the issue of boiling an entire carton of eggs and then needing those eggs for baking and having just an entire carton of hard-boiled eggs. But we love these. My kids love them. They are a great snack. They're really easy protein to grab to give to the kids on the go or in a quick fix. So I boil my eggs for about 10 to 12 minutes. I take them out, I let them cool, and then sometimes we just eat them warm because a warm hard-boiled egg is amazing. And then sometimes we stick them in the fridge and then we have them ready and on hand for any time someone wants a snack. So I want to thank you guys all for coming along with me today and going through some of my favorite kitchen, pantry essentials, staples, all of the things. I really love having all these things on hand. I make videos every single Sunday, and I hope to see you next week. Subscribe to the channel if you are new and give this video a thumbs up. And I'll see you guys really soon in another video. Bye, my friends.